You stand beneath the blinding Mediterranean sun, the salt air stinging your eyes. Chains bite into your wrists as a trader wipes, the sweat from your shoulder turning you toward the crowd. You are not a person here, only a measurement of worth, a bundle of youth and symmetry, waiting for the hammer's fall. Before we descend into this forgotten corner of Rome's grandeur, take a moment to join this journey through history's unseen corridors. Like the voices of the past, your presence gives these stories weight. If you find meaning in uncovering what time tried to erase, leave a like, subscribe for more historical deep dives, and tell us where in the world are you watching from. It's remarkable that across oceans and centuries, we can gather here to confront the shadows of empires together. Rome was a city that measured everything: wealth, virtue, lineage, beauty, and in the roaring markets near the Forum Boarium, even the human body became an item of inventory. Beneath awnings of dyed linen, traders called out prices in clipped Latin: puer ex Graecia, pulcher literatus. A boy from Greece, handsome, educated. Buyers leaned in to inspect teeth, muscle tone, the clarity of the eyes. A tilt of the chin could raise or lower the price by 100 denarii. For Rome's elite, youth itself had become a currency. Victories abroad flooded the city with captives Greeks taken after revolts, Syrians sold by middlemen, Celts shipped down from the misty north. Once their chains were removed, their individuality vanished. Their hair was oiled, skin perfumed, taught to bow without trembling. The merchants called them delicia delights. In ledgers, they appeared beside columns of spices and ivory. In practice, they were traded as living luxuries for senators and generals whose villas glittered with every indulgence the empire could summon. Beneath the surface glamour of marble and gold lay a world built on calculated cruelty. Auctioneers used bright dyes to mark origin and age: blue for the Greek Isles, red for Gaul, yellow for the East. Each mark carried a meaning. Greek boys were prized for their refinement, Gauls for their strength, Syrians for their grace. Even fear became a selling point. A trembling lip was read as obedience, silence as spirit to be broken. The auctions were public theater. Citizens gathered not merely to buy, but to watch. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders as bids rose and fell. Laughter mingled with the cries of the condemned. It was said that during the triumph of Lucullus, the slave markets overflowed so completely that the price of a human life dropped below that of a jar of honey. Wealthy Romans saw it as providence. The gods reward victory with beauty. None questioned what that reward cost. One account from the jurist Ulpian speaks of a boy of noble bearing, purchased in Antioch for the house of a senator. His name was erased from the record, but a single note survives: ad cultum corporis, for the cultivation of the body. The phrase sounds clinical, but in it lies the essence of Roman hypocrisy, a society that preached restraint while consuming youth as decoration. To walk the auction row was to hear the machinery of empire at work: scribes tallying profits, notaries stamping seals of sale, physicians inspecting bodies for defects. The scene could resemble any market, if not for the eyes of the captive's eyes that darted between faces, searching for mercy where none could be found. The traders knew how to present them: a hand placed softly on the shoulder to show obedience, a forced smile to suggest docility. Behind every display was the unspoken rule: beauty equaled survival. There were rituals, too. Before being sold, boys were often given new Roman names, soft, flattering ones like Eros, Hyacinthus, or Felix. Their native tongues forbidden, their identities rewritten. In these small acts of erasure, Rome maintained the illusion of civilization. To name something was to own it. To rename it was to erase its past. Yet there were moments when the illusion cracked. Seneca once wrote of seeing a child so lovely that he seemed carved by the hand of a god, brought to auction. The philosopher confessed unease not because of the boy's suffering, but because such beauty tempted corruption. Even Rome's moralists could not separate ethics from aesthetics. The empire that conquered nations could not conquer its appetite for youth. The market's sounds linger long after the crowd disperses. The clatter of coins, the creak of wooden platforms, the low chant of the auctioneer. For those sold that day, Rome's streets would become a gilded labyrinth, one where obedience was survival and silence was the only language left. As night falls over the Tiber, the same traders count their earnings by torchlight, preparing for tomorrow's sale. The marble platforms are washed clean, but the air still carries the scent of oil, sweat, and fear. In the morning, the sun will rise again over the same city, the same empire that calls itself the pinnacle of civilization. And beneath that sun, another child will be led to the block. His fate already written in the ledgers of men who believe beauty is theirs to own. By day, the villa glows with laughter. Bronze fountains murmur, lyres hum in the courtyard, and perfumed guests drift between mosaicked halls like drifting petals. But when night descends and the laughter fades, another kind of music begins the quiet choreography of obedience, the rustle of silk against marble, the whisper of a door closing on what the city must never see. Rome's private world began where its laws grew silent. The domus was not merely a home, it was a stage. Its walls, painted with myths of gods and lovers, concealed a theater where affection was rehearsed, pleasure was rationed, and status dictated every gesture. To enter these corridors was to breathe an air thick with incense and hierarchy. Slaves moved like shadows, their footsteps muffled by woven carpets imported from the east. At the center, always, stood the master, his will the only constant truth. One such household belonged to Senator Marcus Atilius Regulus, a man praised in the Senate for his gravitas and virtus. His villa on the Palatine was famous for its symmetry, its courtyards open to the sun, its rooms adorned with marble from Paros. Yet within that order lay cruelty so methodical it passed for elegance. Among his household was a concubine, a youth purchased in Delos, known only by the name Atilius had given him, Leontios. His hair was cut in the Greek fashion, his tunic of fine linen, his silence his greatest adornment. To the guests he was invisible. He poured wine, knelt when spoken to, vanished when dismissed. But in private the senator's voice softened. "You are fortunate," he would say, running a hand along the boy's shoulder. "In my house, obedience earns comfort." Comfort, a word that in Rome meant survival. Letters from the period hint at these quiet arrangements. The poet martial jokes of patrons who keep wisdom on their couches, a thinly veiled reference to enslaved scholars or beautiful attendants who served both mind and body. Juvenal sneers at men who lecture on virtue by day and seek boys by moonlight. Behind satire lay truth, that Rome's moralists wrote verses by the same lamplight that illuminated their indulgence. Leontios learned quickly that the line between favor and ruin was drawn not by merit, but by mood. A misplaced glance, a moment of hesitation and comfort became punishment. But he also discovered another truth: knowledge was a weapon sharper than fear. The senator prized wit, adored poetry, fancied himself a philosopher. So Leontios began to read aloud from Virgil, his voice steady, his diction perfect. He learned to flatter, to ask questions that mirrored his master's pride. Slowly, subtly, he turned attention into dependence. When guests visited, they praised the boy's eloquence. "A charming pupil," they said. Regulus smiled, unaware that each compliment loosened his authority. In a world where affection was performance, Leontios had learned to become both actor and playwright. His rebellion was not escape, it was endurance refined into art. Beyond this rare story of survival lay thousands with no names, no verses, no marble tombs. Most concubines lived and died unrecorded, their labor folded into the rhythm of the household like a melody no one hears until it stops. The villa's architecture itself enforced silence. Open atriums for show, hidden chambers for secrecy. The Roman idea of pietas duty, devotion, was displayed in public gestures, not private conscience. Rome loved virtue as spectacle, not substance. The contradiction was everywhere. Statues of modest goddesses adorned bedrooms where power was stripped of morality. Philosophers preached restraint while purchasing pleasure. Even the language conspired to disguise cruelty. Words like servus amoris, servant of love, replaced the truth of ownership. A society that worshipped self-control built its glory upon bodies denied control entirely. Pliny the Younger once described visiting a friend's estate where the slaves' quarters were hidden, lest the unseemly sight of necessity disturb the eye. The phrase reveals everything. Rome's beauty required blindness. Its villas gleamed not because they were pure, but because their shadows were deep enough to swallow the truth. Sometimes, though, the mask slipped. A servant's sob heard behind a curtain. A broken lyre string at a banquet, followed by uneasy silence. And in that silence, for a heartbeat, Rome glimpsed itself a civilization that claimed to civilize others, yet could not master its own desires. One winter evening, Regulus died suddenly during a feast. His will listed his estates, his jewels, his horses, but not the name Leontios. When the scribes sealed the tablets, the boy's existence vanished into the folds of history. Some said he fled. Others whispered he was sold again, perhaps to another senator, perhaps to a poet who loved beauty more gently. The truth was buried beneath the tiles of the villa, beneath centuries of dust and marble. The music of that household has long faded, yet the question it leaves behind still stirs the air. What becomes of those whose lives exist only in the spaces between laughter and silence? Beyond the velvet doors, the torches dim. The house sleeps. And somewhere in the echoing dark, a footstep, soft, hesitant, moves toward the atrium, as if testing the idea of freedom. The marble is cracked now. Weeds grow between the stones where senators once walked, and the wind hums through the ruins like a voice trying to remember its own words. Time has bleached everything: the villas, the portraits, the names. Yet if you listen closely, beneath the sound of dust shifting and doves calling, you might hear the faint echo of another life, the footstep of someone Rome forgot. In the afterglow of empire, the beauty that once fueled its hunger turned to ash. The boys who had been paraded through marble halls awoke one day to find their worth dissolved, their youth spent. Those who survived the favor of their masters often did not survive the loss of it. Some were sold again, cheaper now, to brothels and taverns that lined the Subura, Rome's restless underbelly. There, the music of lyres was replaced by the clatter of dice, the smell of roses by the stench of sour wine. Others were simply abandoned, left to wander the outskirts where broken statues and discarded lives gathered in the same silence. A papyrus fragment from Egypt records a sale of one Greek, 23 years, formerly educated, now idle. The phrase is clinical, efficient, final. The empire did not mourn, it repurposed. Those too, bruised to serve pleasure, were sent to labor, to row, to vanish. Rome's machinery of beauty was also a machinery of disposal. And yet, even amid this machinery, humanity found ways to whisper back. Archaeologists have uncovered graffiti etched into the plaster of a villa in Pompeii. "I was here, though I was not seen." Another, on a wall near the baths, reads simply, "Eros remembers." The words are faint, carved by a hand that must have trembled, but their defiance endures. In those scratched lines lies something the empire could not tax or tame: the refusal to disappear quietly. We catch glimpses of these ghosts in the margins of history. A burial slab from Ostia bears the inscription, "To Lycos, once beloved, now free." The word "free" was added later, in smaller letters, perhaps by a friend, perhaps by the same hand that once poured wine at a senator's table. Freedom came rarely, but when it did, it was both gift and curse. What did freedom mean to someone who no longer knew who he had been before? The philosophers spoke of virtue and order, while the city beneath them rotted with contradictions. Seneca wrote of mercy while keeping slaves himself. Cicero praised the harmony of law while defending the legality of bondage. Even the poets Ovid, Tibullus, Catullus turned longing into literature, crafting beauty from the same hierarchy that destroyed it. Love conquers all, wrote Virgil, but in Rome, love was always conquest first. As centuries passed, the system reinvented itself. The trade in human beauty did not die with the empire, it merely changed costume. Byzantium inherited the practice under silk banners. Later, Renaissance patrons dressed it in marble again. The faces of antiquity survived in sculpture smooth, idealized, eternal, but the real faces, the living ones, were lost. Rome remembered only the perfection, never the price. Imagine one of them now. A boy once named Leontios, or perhaps something else before Rome renamed him. His hands are calloused, his back bent from years of labor on a farm outside Ostia. He passes a marble fragment half buried in the soil, a piece of a statue's face, serene and unbroken. He pauses, touches it, then looks away. The empire that once measured him by beauty has become dust, and yet the image of perfection still endures. Does he curse it, or does he envy it? In the twilight of empire, priests offered prayers to foreign gods brought by the conquered. Shrines to Isis, Mithras, and Cybele filled the corners of a city once proud of its purity. Among those prayers, scholars found small offerings: carved wooden figures, bronze mirrors, sometimes a single lock of hair. They were tokens of gratitude or mourning. The nameless had found new names to call upon when Rome refused to hear theirs. And so, in the ruins, we are left with fragments: the scratch of a stylus on plaster, the faint impression of a body in volcanic ash, the echo of a song never written down. Each fragment whispers the same question: how does a civilization build monuments to law and love while perfecting the art of ownership? The camera lingers on the forum as the light fades. Shadows stretch across the columns. Pigeons settle on the broken pediments where gods once stood. Somewhere beneath the soil lie bones that were never given tombs, stories never granted names. The city sleeps, but the silence beneath it is not empty, it hums, restless, remembering. Because empire never truly dies. It lingers in the ways we measure worth, in the beauty we buy, in the voices we fail to hear. And in that lingering, the ghosts of Rome still walk, neither avenged nor forgotten, reminding us that marble lasts longer than flesh, but not longer than guilt.